Welcome to today's LatentView's webinar on accelerating digital transformation through data integration. I'm Abhijeet Kashyape, Director at LatentView Europe, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I want to thank and welcome Simon Bailey for making this discussion possible. With one of every two Fortune 500 companies merged, acquired, bankrupted, or fallen off the list, since the year 2000, it's clear that digital disruption is real. Organizations need to pursue strategies to not only survive disruptions, but also thrive in this new post-digital world. And one of the key strategies is accelerating digital transformation through data integration. Simon is the Global Marketing Chief Operating Officer at Standard Life Aberdeen, with over 25 years of experience across financial services focused on insights-driven marketing. Simon is responsible for strategy, planning, and operating model for a global marketing function that operates across institutional, wholesale, and retail channels. His team successfully launched and developed a global CRM capability for the newly merged business, which included the development of predictive analytic models for cross-selling and retention. Simon sees a huge opportunity for asset managers to apply digital capabilities and the smart use of data within the B2B environment to augment existing distribution practices and increasingly engage clients centrally, providing fuller and more cost-effective coverage. He's the digital leader building the organization's digital DNA. In this session today, Simon will share insights on his experiences in trying to drive digital transformation, highlighting what has worked and what has not. Simon will also explain how data-driven digital transformation requires to think differently and talk about the business impact, and finally look at the enablers for the organizations to achieve this. Today's session has three sections. First, digital transformation. Second, business impact. And third is the enablers. I encourage you all to interact through your questions at the end of each of the three sections where we have time for Q&A. You can also type in your questions in the chat window and I'll be happy to ask on your behalf. Please join me in welcoming Simon. Simon, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an honor to have you.
No, thank you, Abhijeet, and welcome everybody. I hope everyone is well and surviving during what are extremely challenging times, I'm sure, for all of us. Yeah, I'm delighted to be able to take part in this event and discuss the opportunities and the challenges in terms of trying to progress what we're terming here a digital transformation journey. I'd like to think we've had some successes, but we've also had some challenges, which I'll be more than happy to sort of share our war wounds with you and to hopefully share some experiences as we go through the Q&As as we run through this session. I thought before we start, in terms of that first section Abhijeet mentioned in terms of digital strategy that we're embarking on, just a quick bit of background in terms of, I guess, Standard Life Aberdeen and my role within that organisation. Just to give the rest of the discussion some context. So as some of you may be aware, Standard Life Aberdeen is a FTSE 100 financial services organisation based in the UK, but has operations in EMEA, Americas and APAC. We have one company but two operational brands. Aberdeen Standard Investments is our global asset management operation, and Standard Life is our UK life savings business, which provides savings products as well as advice and platform services to the advisors in the UK. As you also might be aware, Standard Life Aberdeen is a company that has a rich history over the last 3 years of significant corporate change. Firstly, with the merger of Aberdeen Asset Management and Standard Life, and secondly, the sale of the insurance arm of Standard Life to Phoenix Group. So it's very much a business that is entering a new chapter of its 160-odd year history, finding a revised purpose for itself as an organisation, with a very strong growth ambition to maximise the opportunities that we see in terms of the life savings, wealth and asset management markets in which we operate. As Abhijeet alluded to, I am the Global Marketing Chief Operating Officer, so obviously work within a single global marketing function for Standard Life Aberdeen. We have what we've called a sort of a 4x4 model, where we have 4 centres of excellence and then 4 regional marketing teams. Our centres of excellence are really there to provide the platform for the regional marketing teams to be able to execute activity effectively and efficiently. So it's the core platform. So three core areas in terms of global brands, global digital, and global content are sort of very much managed centrally. And then my function in terms of the Chief Operating Office, I like to think kind of is really designed there to provide the help facilitate the direction, and then really provide the glue to make sure that the marketing operation can function as efficiently and effectively as it needs to do so. As for myself, as Abhijeet mentioned, I'm probably 25 years plus experience of different financial services, ranging from general insurance and private medical insurance in my early days with Bupa, through to pensions, asset management, much more latterly. And in that time, I've occupied a number of different marketing roles across most of the disciplines you see within marketing, but I guess increasingly focused on data, insights, and analytics to get to an insight-driven marketing practice, which I kind of believe and I'm passionate about in terms of how I go about executing my duties. So without further ado, let's dive into the first section. Abhijeet, maybe if you could kick the slides on a couple. I think we have a slide that starts talking about digital strategy. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. So to give some context in terms of our journey from a Standard Life Aberdeen perspective, it's obviously worth probably starting with the drivers in terms of what has led to affecting the case for digital transformation within the organisation. And like with all changes, there are sort of things that we are responding to externally as well as drivers which are internal. Externally, our industry, specifically within the asset management section, is one that's under huge pressure in terms of margins being squeezed. Abhijeet referenced the compression of the Fortune 500 early in his brief introduction there, but the level of M&A activity within the global asset management industry is really quite something, and it's very much a barbell effect of you need to be large and at scale, or you need to be a boutique and more specialist offering, clearly something that's a bit more distinct. And I guess to some extent it's like things like retail industries where anything that's in the middle is getting squeezed. So there's a big shift in our industry that we're trying to navigate on that level. In addition, value chain is becoming squeezed as well. Simplistically, in our industry, it's typically made up of a customer, the platform in which they trade through, the advisor with who they seek advice, and then helps structure their investment portfolios, and then the asset manager that provides the investment solutions. Who gets what proportion of the overall fee the customer is prepared to pay is under hot contest, and therefore the asset manager is at very much a danger of being compressed to the far end of just providing investment componentry, and that leads to a heavy focus purely onto performance, which, as we know, can clearly vary, come and go with different scenarios. So as an asset manager, it's much more important to get a deeper connection with the parts of that value chain and occupy a bigger piece of that to secure our future going forward. And then the third real killer driver that we're responding to is what I've termed to as the Vitalization of the industry. Traditionally, it's been a heavily intermediated and business-to-business market. It's also been one where individuals haven't had to take too much focus of their savings and their long-term savings requirements, because they've been protected by things provided by companies such as defined benefit pensions or from state provision of aid as well. And as we're probably all familiar on this call, a lot of that is dialing back very, very quickly, and a horrible industry phrase in terms of the democratization of financial risk is referred to, which basically just means individuals having to take a greater degree of responsibility for their wealth and saving going forward. So as a result, the implication for us as an asset manager is that we can no longer hide behind the distribution channels to reach those individuals, we have to be far more in tune with the consumers and the customers in the market that we serve, and that provides a pretty different dynamic, as you'll appreciate. Internally, our drivers for change, I sort of touched on a little bit in terms of the merger and integration activity that we've spoken about. And I think, given where we are now as an organisation, one of the things we struggled with when we thought about digital strategies, it's such a broad term, particularly when we think about the fact we operate across an institutional space, a wholesale space, and a retail space, and the requirements and the implications for each are significant in terms of what that means from a way that you deal and access those customers. So if we like to think of institutions as corporate organizations, it's a very structured buying process. It's often, well marshaled through consultants. It's RFI, pitch, win and on board sort of stages to that behavior for largely one-off slugs of assets to manage. You then move into a wholesale space and the relationships that you have there. Again, arguably at the sort of top end of that market, it feels quite similar to an institutional market, but importantly, there's a second stage to that wholesale sale. It's okay to get your sort of fund on panel and or be part of a model portfolio. The real value is then maximizing the flow of the assets that you can get from the advisors who are actually dealing with the clients who are going to recommend the solutions where you are present to them. So you have a second stage process. So the digital requirements, the opportunity to engage digitally in the wholesale channel is quite different again from that institutional space. And then, needless to say, when you move to a direct to consumer proposition within the retail market, you are no longer behind the B2B world. You are taking full ownership of the full client life cycle, customer life cycle, and servicing and engaging them. So I guess my point is, across all of those sort of things, that the requirements for a digital strategy do vary, and one of the challenges being trying to understand what are the commonalities across there that we enable us to build a approach, whether it be systems, process, or people, and where's the difference, and where do we really need to focus that attention. From a marketing perspective, our digital strategy kind of obviously reflects that. A lot of our focus has been about internally building a single MarTech and capability model that sits across both of our operational brands, Standard Life and Aberdeen Standard Investments. That's been critical if we want to operate efficiently with a team that can operate across both brands. But importantly, as we kind of went through this latest phase, we've also kind of want to make sure that we can really focus on customer experience and client experience as a genuine competitive differentiator to address some of the value compression issues that I touched on earlier. So for us, the focus has really been around three areas. One, about how do we begin to think about delivering the complete end-to-end customer and sort of client experience. So actually it takes it beyond the traditional silo of marketing across distribution. How can we, as a function and as a broader distribution function, begin to think about that sort of end-to-end process from prospecting through to win back. The second area that we focus on is clearly if we want to deliver a client experience, you kind of need to know who those clients are in far greater depth and detail than we ever have. And I'll probably come on to this a little bit later in terms of, again, the asset management industry, the rate at which actually some of the things like financial data get separated from the client who gives you the money is quite staggering. So actually just trying to find out the basics of the client and the assets that they have with you can at times be a challenge. But beyond that, understanding how they engage with us across all the touch points we operate with them is really important. If we can do that, we can understand the experience that we can and deliver them. And then I think the third part that we've been focused on very much is about, then how do we enable the agility and through the operating model that can deliver that type of experience. So three core areas, and you can see there are a number of different components that we've looked at to do. Now, it's fair to say I wouldn't want to give anyone the impression on this call that we are fully transformed or even sort of digital leaders in the industry that we serve. But I do think we are on the start of a good journey and have made some good progress. As Abhijeet mentioned, The single global CRM capability puts us in good stead. We have a good consistent view of our clients. So at least we talk about them in the same way. And we also have a good understanding in terms of the level of value they provide to us, as well as the relationship activity that we have around them. We're increasingly attaching marketing interaction data to those clients, so we can generally see that sort of broader touch point that we have with them. And naturally, that's involved a lot of heavy data system work, focusing on cleansing, focusing on aggregating with lots of third-party data sources that we will need to do to produce that view. But at least that allows us to get to a position of going, that very clear understanding of the client, its dynamics in terms of behavioural performance and financial performance. That means we should better take better action. The second area where we made sort of progress, again, beginning to move to a single integrated MarTech platform, and not only that, identify some gaps and some areas where we need to accelerate. So we've largely moved to that capability with an underlying data model that supports it. But like anything in terms of digital communication with clients and experience focus, things like the way that we think about content strategy development and manage content through our production capability leads to a new set of requirements. So we're beginning to identify some advances to that capability stack that we need. But it's not to say that we have to go away and build all of that and then wait for a long time before we can deliver. We've actually started to deliver some interesting BI and analytical activity that's beginning to inform activity, whether that's marketing KPI development, so a better view in terms of marketing impact by linking marketing metrics right the way through to the distribution activity and the sales activity that happens, through to, again, another example, being in a position where we can now generate marketing qualified leads into the sales teams as calls to action, which helps fully align that sort of sales and marketing activity. And third and finally, and I've only touched on these briefly because we've got plenty of other ground to cover, but beginning to think about how we can use data analytics in the sense of reputation management tracking by scanning focused digital media sort of channels to understand what share of voice we're getting as an organization, what the themes of conversation are happening in that organization, and how much we're past them. That's helping us evolve our content strategy by making sure that, for example, we want to be very, very much associated with and proud of the strengths we have in our responsible investing capabilities. And if we need to understand the level of conversation that's happening about things like ESG and responsible investing, and we want to see ourselves part of that conversation. And if we're not, then that will spur us to create new content, new forms of engagement mechanisms to try and catch up on that. So a number of things that we are beginning to do, I guess, that help the start of this journey. But I'll pause there because I just wanted to give a bit of context up front to this conversation in terms of where we were, what was driving the sort of activity we've done, and a little bit about how we've gone about it before we talk about business impact and enablers. So Abhijeet, I'll hand back to you and see if there's anything you want to pick up from that opening gambit.
Thank you, Simon. I guess this was very interesting. What I want to do is actually open it up for questions within this section. But while we get questions, I want to really congratulate you, Simon. How did you, my question to you would be, how did you convince your management to get on this path? And what would you tell organizations who are just starting on the journey and organizations who are midway?
Yeah, no, thanks. It's a good question. How did it start? I think the stars didn't quite line up, but a number of factors came into play here. The first was actually a genuine belief that it's a very trite statement, but the business was talking about wanting to be sort of client focused, and the reality was we just didn't have that view as an organization. And when some of the executives were asking questions about how well we knew with clients, so I was in a position where I was on the point to try and answer that view. And as an asset manager, we can provide a great view by product, but we couldn't get the answer in terms of clients. So even asking basic questions in terms of, like, who are our top 50 clients, who are our top 100 clients, you know, what do they look like, what level of engagement do we have? We just didn't have. So I think partly it was the business wanted to go in that sort of space, and therefore could see we had a gap, and was therefore just prepared to back that gap, and we were able to put together, you know, a credible plan for how we would progress against that. And I think that was probably the biggest thing. And I think as you go through things like mergers and acquisitions, and you naturally get to a point about saying, actually, when Aberdeen and Standard Life are coming together, how many common clients do we have? You know, that's a really hard question to ask when you're, you know, from the States, the business that we're in. So the external factors helped drive this. And I was lucky in terms of probably sponsors who were less worried about, you know, spending hours into a business case trying to really quantify every sort of single benefit that you might get from developing a CRM program, through to actually just pitching at the right level, going, why would you not need this? How can you operate your business if you do not know these type of fundamental questions? And we got a lot of traction just by really focusing on terms of, you know, the criticality of some of this core knowledge and how you would then use it. And it's surprising how quickly you can come back with genuine commercial cases off the back of that. So I remember, you know, one of the first things we did with this was be able to look at, okay, well, what was the client coverage that we had with our client directors? You know, how dependent were we on some of our client directors for the assets that we had within the UK? We never really had that sort of view before. And we found that out of a team of 20 client directors, we had 3 who were managing close to 60-65% of the total institutional assets, which just felt bonkers when you actually looked at it in the cold light of day. So it then led to question about, okay, well, let's think about client coverage. You know, what does that feeling of client coverage look like for what we want to achieve? So as soon as we start on this journey about trying to make that view very clearly, and then make sure, you know, it's the old adage, make sure you deliver a little regularly to keep the momentum. And we found that the insight that we could generate from a client perspective actually galvanized the efforts and wanted people to, I guess, commit more effort and more resource to make sure that we got to a good place on this.
Thank you. Thanks. I think it's interesting, Simon, because what we've seen also, you know, so where do you think, you know, I think you answered this, but where do you think that digital is having the greatest impact? Is it at the new frontiers? Is it at the core? Is it at the foundation? You know, is there a specific area where you would start?
Yeah, no, again, it's interesting. I mean, I think everyone would like to think it's always going to be at the frontier, and that's where you get a lot of excitement, because people see things in their normal lives and get excited about, you know, the amazing things that are happening in this world. And but again, I think for us, again, going back to, you know, the real drivers here, if I'm honest, were, you know, you've got an industry profitability issue that's going on massively, impacting asset managers. And arguably, as a consequence of that, we have an integration and asset management business that's sort of coming together to try and reorganize itself. So a lot of our focus has been about addressing those two kind of aligned themes, I guess. So we've been very much about building, how do you build your core in a way that gives you the ability to scale and grow in the future, and how can we become as efficient as possible, but make sure we do that in a way that is 100% rooted in making sure that the client data and client insight is front and center of what we have available to us, and what we own, and what we treat as a very, very important corporate asset.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Simon. We have a few questions coming in. You know, one question we have got is, what's the better way to think of digital transformation strategy? Is it use case driven approach, lean and mean, or should we look at technology enabled enterprise-wide implementations?
Definitely the former. I think it has to be use case led. Ultimately, again, I think maybe probably importantly, specifically in a distribution sort of mindset, the question is always, the biggest question is, I always will get given, is what does this actually allow us to do? what will this actually give us? What difference does this actually make to our clients and our customers? I mean, they're the three questions that we come back to. So, you know, we've always embarked on this thinking of it as a use case thing, as opposed to, hey guys, look, have you heard about CDPs? These, you know, CDPs are here, they can help out in this sort of way, and then trying to find a home for them. We've been very much use case driven.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Simon. We have another question coming in from Stuart. Thank you, Stuart. What were the key milestones so far in your data-driven journey at SLA?
Key milestones. I think it's been, I mean, the key milestone was step one, after it sounds, get to a consistent client classification and taxonomy across the bit that the business sort of buys into. So that, I mean, this is a big, I mean, it sounds like a data issue, but it's not. It's a bigger strategic conversation in the company in terms of how do we want to view the landscape that we seek to serve. And you can cut that by different ways. You can segment by, you know, what products they buy, or by sales segmentation in terms of how big they are, or you can by a type of client that you're trying to serve. So actually trying to get that taxonomy right was really important, because that then becomes a spine against which you hang everything off. So that was the first milestone for us to get to, and we didn't realize it at the time. We powered on beyond that point, and we had to go back and said, actually, we haven't got the foundation stone in place. I think we then gone through milestones, said, look, once we had that, we wanted to get to, okay, what's the level of relationship activity around those clients, and can actually use case, can we make sure that our sales team have really, really quick access to the customer data that they need to plan their days and target the right clients and manage opportunities and all these things. Then it was about how can we strengthen the knowledge, make the decision maker, the sales guy and girl, better based on the insight that we can provide them. So, okay, let's make sure the basics, they know it's easy to know what fund they hold, whether there's been inflows or outflows, or whether the client is at risk. What engagement are they having with sort of different forms of marketing communication that we're having? So I guess the milestones I'm probably saying is it's been almost about building out the depth of knowledge that we have on that client. So first off, know the client, then understand the relationship, then understand the value, then understand the level of marketing engagement that they have. You know, then we need to be into really clear view of what their performance experience has been. And then beyond that, I think we're then thinking about, okay, what are the other third-party sources of data we can now access that will give us even richer insight in terms of what that individual and that organization are doing. So, yeah, I think that's what we've been looking at.
Thank you. Thanks, Simon. I guess we have some more questions. We'll come to those questions at the end of the session, or we'll answer that. Let's move on to the next section. Interest of time, I guess the next section is more about business impact. So over to you, Simon, in terms of talking about what would be the business impact.
Yeah. Okay. If we could get the slide back up, there's a slide that probably helps follow some of the next bit. So yeah, in terms of business impact, I guess, so what the overall strategy seek to achieve that we're sort of following, I think it's three core broad areas. I'll touch on a couple of these during that section. Then I think the first one has been, again, predominantly sales team productivity. Again, as I mentioned, asset management as it currently stands is predominantly a face-to-face led distribution effort. So our use case has been, how do we make that sales team as productive as possible to be able to, you know, manage the right level of clients and generate the right level of business from those. So all about, you know, connecting to the right people at the right time. You know, what can we do to make sure that sales teams are enabled to basically target those clients based on a full knowledge of all the interactions they have with us as a firm over a period of time. How can we help the sales manager, you know, as he comes into the office in the morning, you know, see where the activity should be prioritized, you know, flag the opportunities of maybe people he hasn't seen for 6 months that, you know, they probably should see, or something's happened with that account that he might not have otherwise known about, that means there's a call to action for them to take steps. So, you know, how can we get that sales team to, you know, be as proactive and reactive, you know, very quickly as we can do. The second element of the productivity curve, I think, has been about the qualified leads that I sort of touched on. So, it's not, we have different levels of account management as you'd expect, but for certainly a core tier of who we deal with, we are beginning to provide leads for those people to sort of follow up. So if you take something like our UK wholesale market, which has I think probably over 20,000 advisory registered individuals in the market, you clearly can't keep on top of all of those. But what we can start doing now is providing leads into that sales team to say, actually, here's a client who holds, I don't know, UK smaller companies as asset class with us. They've begun engaging with content we've been sending to them and getting them to hook into, say, on European equities, just a random example. Here you go, salesperson. There looks like there could be a cross-sell opportunity here, and these things are starting to fill in the sort of calendar for the sales teams to make that every call they make has got a better chance of a positive outcome. And I think the third element around the sales team productivity in terms of the impact we've been trying to drive is probably more of a planning and strategic one. So actually, if you wrap all this stuff up together, you can then sort of make better decisions as to where you allocate your resource or which campaigns you choose to go after. It's not a project I've specifically been involved with directly within our asset management business, but we're looking at things like a buy list analytics tool where we can consume external third-party data and understand which advisors hold what funds as part of their holding, and where we see competitive movements in, like, fund managers leaving, for an example, we're very quickly now able to identify, literally in not even sort of seconds, produce a list of all those advisor firms that hold money in that competitor's account that's suddenly suffering some form of problem, like a fund manager leaving. So, our use cases here, this is really where we've started. A lot of our transformation activity has been about maximizing that sales team productivity element. The next area is kind of really around reduced cost to serve. Again, probably not, it's a bit of a consistent theme given what we've sort of said. So yeah, in direct alignment to the sort of changing industry profitability, we've got to look at new ways to both reduce the cost to serve, but also reduce the cost to acquire customers and clients. So, our benefits, we've been looking at initiatives that undertake what we're looking at to really direct that marketing spend, that distribution spend efficiently. I think this is an important point in terms of, again, we're not there yet, but increasingly thinking about this as a distribution activity versus a marketing activity or a sales activity or servicing activity. So looking at the pool of resource we have across the functions of marketing, sales and servicing, how can we optimize our client acquisition and engagement strategies? So, some of the key areas, again, how can we increase client coverage through greater application of digital client management as a channel in itself to manage a chunk of client resources that we might not otherwise be able to manage realistically or as well as we'd like to, just by relying on a face-to-face channel or a telephony channel. Or, as I sort of said before, how can we use, data and analytics to basically augment the efforts that our telesales and our face-to-face sales teams have. But the coverage one is an interesting one. I mean, if I just take the UK institutional space as an example to give a bit of a flavour, there are sort of kind of roughly 2,500 institutional clients. There's probably 1,000 or so that are dealt with largely on an operational basis due to the sort of size of the assets they have with us. That's not to say what potential they have. We just had a view of what they have with us. So there could be some genuine opportunity within that bank. And then we've got about 1,500 that are managed by our face-to-face account management team, who equally look after roughly about 80 clients each. And so, but the simple kind of factor of math, you kind of know that's a bit of a stretch because, typically I think the old rationale used to be every account manager could realistically look after probably about 40 accounts really, really well, given the number of working days there are in a year and the amount of effort that goes into that. So if you kind of think of that, you say, well, actually half of that 1,500 clients, we're probably not that close to. We're certainly not close to 1,000 other clients that we have. So really, what is the potential here to actually have a more automated and centralized communication engagement program for a body of clients here that could then in turn develop leads and develop engagement and relationships with an audience that we otherwise wouldn't be able to do. So it helps both help us in terms of thinking about reducing the cost to serve, because potentially if that's effective, your model of the number of face-to-face account managers you need relative to your size of your client bank, that ratio can change for the better. And also it helps your, reducing your cost of acquisition, because all you're doing is using the data you've got. You're not having to spend any more money. You're just finding better ways of engaging with a client bank that's already hooked into you. So clearly a big area where we think there's a big business impact we can make by focusing on activity like that. And then the one that's you have to stand on your head to see deeper client engagement. And yeah, it comes back to maximizing and optimizing marketing budgets and spend. As we probably all recognize, marketing are often too seen as a sort of a cost center versus a revenue driver within the business. And we don't really help ourselves by a weakness of historically not being able to demonstrate the reach and engagement that the activity and spend that we undertake as a marketing function. So we can do so much more, we believe, in terms of understanding that given the increasing digitization of content consumption, it provides the ideal opportunity for us to get a far better view of engagement, real-time view in terms of to what extent people are hooking into, and the ability to make changes far more quickly, as opposed to the old-fashioned sort of campaigning approach of I want to run a campaign on European equities, and in 3 months' time, and you go through the planning, you run the campaign, you wait another 3 months to see what the impact is, and then you work out whether it's moved on, and all of a sudden 6 months on, and you've lost half the year not really being able to make any change. We believe there's a huge opportunity in terms of this reduced to cost to serve element of optimizing that marketing that spend. And then the final bucket really is the deeper client engagement, which I jumped onto a bit too early, which is, again, as I hinted, we're looking to deliver a client experience that's consistent with the value of our brands, Aberdeen Standard Investments and Standard Life. And the key underpin for that, for me, again, is, the benefit we seek is, how well do we know that client? As I sort of mentioned, from a traditional CRM sense, I think as a business, we're probably pretty well placed. But our next focus is how to use that data, particularly, and how do we build that, particularly when a lot of the data in the digital environment is kind of anonymous to us at first sense. So, we're beginning to think, and the business impact is, our customer data has to be activated and managed effectively. We need to have it stored and deployed. And obviously, there's a shifting regulatory environment and privacy activity that sort of sits around that, and things like, the reported death of a third-party cookie with different regulation is really leading us to think about the value now of actually moving to make sure that, how can we engage with the audiences and get to know them as quick as possible, so they can become our primary contacts, and then that will give us the base to sort of kick on and move forward. So, I think this gives us a sense of urgency in terms of, while we've been heavily focused on sales team productivity and that sort of cost to acquire and cost to serve aspect of the business aspect, we're increasingly getting into that client engagement piece, which we always knew we needed to, but it's now very much front and center of our thinking. So again, I'm conscious of time. I might just pause there and pass back to Abhijeet to see if we've had any further questions, or Abhijeet's got any points he'd like to pick up on.
So thank you, Simon. I think it was very interesting when you spoke about reduction in cost to serve and the budgets especially. So while we get questions, one question which I have to ask is, so when you go from a business impact perspective, should investment in such initiatives be linked to the progress and not to the budget cycles?
Yeah, I think yes. I think yes. I should probably be a bit more definitive. I think it should be linked to progress rather than budget cycles. I think you kind of have to. It's an obvious statement, but you kind of have to prove that you get value from the spend that you're that you're putting in. And I think the danger of budget cycles, and we know we still have this in terms of, we're running these things through change programs. We have to go to sort of change boards that meet at certain times. They kind of want to start getting to a world where we'll notionally allow you we'll notionally sign off a certain amount of investment, but we'll just give you this little bit to draw down on first. So can you come back in 3 months and you can ask us for the next bit, you can ask us for the next bit. And I think that approach is really difficult to work with, because obviously these things are longer term in nature, and again kind of more complicated in reality when you come to trying to apply that. So we try and prefer to try and shift that argument around to sort of say, well, no, let's make the business case pitch work, secure the level of funding that we believe we require for the year or to get to a certain point, and then our job is then to go back and report about the impact that we're having at the stages all the way through that, to give confidence that we're going to get to the end point that we said we'd get to.
Mm-hmm. So more in terms of goal-driven, investment decisions.
Sorry, Abhijeet, what was that?
I said more in terms of goal-driven investment decisions. So it should be more goal-driven. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that fits with the kind of use case example that we spoke about earlier. I think I'm a strong believer that's the approach you take, and therefore the access of funding and the evaluation of whether your delivery is then just straight back against your goal completions, your use case delivery.
Right. So we'll give a minute if there are more questions on the business impact section, Simon. And while they are coming up, one more from my side, just from when you were looking at going through this process, was it a two-speed environment? I was just trying to, from an IT perspective and a data perspective, was it like a two-speed environment where you were running your IT systems which had legacy things to do to run BAU, while we were also getting on the fast path?
So sorry, the question: how do you manage the journey when you've got BAU to run as well as the development side of things? Yeah, that's not easy. I think we've approached that by again, we'll get onto this in terms of maybe the enablement in terms of agile working and so on. I think we've tried to create dedicated teams. I think we've tried to make sure that for some of these key initiatives, they are important enough that we carve out space with people and we align them fully to work in a cross-functional team to try and deliver the use case and the outcome that we're looking for, whilst maintaining a core level of people that are sustaining BAU. Now it's never as clear cut as that, but that's what we try and do. And I guess where we're seeking funding, that's where we probably look to use additional of external resource. That's where, again, and we'll get to this in a minute, in terms of trying to increase a bit of agility with strategic sourcing solutions, where you can tap into third parties who understand exactly what we're trying to do, who've worked with us for a long time, understand the business, so they are kind of an extension of the team, as opposed to a more traditional kind of move to a consultancy side argument and have to update them and bring them up to speed for the first 6 months of the project before they start adding any value.
Right. So we have, a couple of more questions, Simon. I'll just take one of them and move to the next section, and we'll come back to the audience at the end of it, if we get time. Otherwise, we'll respond through, emails or other communications. But we have a question coming in. How does a business overcome the client's ability to connect using digital means because of high cost of data in certain countries, like South Africa?
This is a good question. One that I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer, just in terms of South Africa, because we don't have a specific footprint there. I think Yeah, I mean, I guess it comes down to, in terms of, I think one of the key things I'd say is, there's a couple of cost of external data and so on, and there's challenges getting it. Like ever, the only thing I'd sort of say with this is, when you get in some of these conversations, lots of people say they need lots of data to really make this work, and you kind of have to just take a hard stance and, actually what data is really important, what's really going to be useful or give you the confidence to act or be reliable enough, and just really focus down on that, because there are lots of things you could do, but I think the key question is, for value, what are the things that really do make a difference in terms of your actual business process going forward.
Thank you, Simon. I guess we'll move to the next section, the last one, interesting one, enablers. It would be interesting to understand what were some of the enablers and how did you approach them?
Yeah, thank you. So again, everything seems to be in three things. I think, again, the first one, I think I've called it linking client experience or customer experience. I think part of this is about, yes, the end-to-end, making sure you try and take a view from prospecting all the way through to retention and win-back activity, about, what, again, it's just what is it you're trying to do. But I think probably broader is, again, thinking of that organizationally, again, it's how it's resonated with me in terms of, if I think about it, to some extent, some of the challenges we face as an organization are almost the traditional silos of marketing, sales, client service, relationship management, almost work against a genuine client experience approach, because everyone takes part of their bit of the funnel and works in their different ways to try and achieve what they're looking to do. But that the genuine client experience is from everything from when you first touch them, when you first start engaging with them, through to onboarding them, through to servicing them, through to if they leave, then to sustaining a relationship with them, so they become a prospect that you can win back again at some point. So I generally think, and again, we're not there yet. We've had some conversations, and we've worked in slightly different ways to try and achieve some of these things. But how you can, I think about that end-to-end journey, and therefore use that as a way of guiding the activity versus think about what's getting done in marketing, what's getting done in servicing, what's getting done in sales, and so on. So how you align the organization and the effort. And the question is there real value of having, I know some areas have done it, client experience, customer experience sitting as a sort of a genuine central function, which has a range of things that serves across that sort of distribution landscape, or are there ways you can get marketing, sales, and servicing really kind of operating in a way that gets that end-to-end join up? Because if it doesn't, you'll put in these big initiatives, and there'll be points which it will really sort of jar or not connect, and where that happens, it will, I believe, kind of kill the efforts that have been made. I think the other things around CX are kind of pretty well known in terms of, it sounds a bit wishy-washy, but having some very, very strong client experience principles that support your brand ambition, I think is important. Having skill sets that can generally sort of journey map and with personas to map those routes through, so you know what experience you're trying to deliver, and you know exactly how you're going to deliver them. And I think, again, I think all too often these things can seem fluffy, particularly in asset management and other financial services. But this is just rooted in, you need to understand how you actually physically interact with a client. What is their actual decision-making process that they go through when they are considering what their asset allocation might be, or their preferred manager roster, or their tactical asset allocation decisions that they may be making. And what are really the moments that matter as you go through that process, about where you can really make an impression and take a stance. That's what your client experience or your customer experience needs to be based around. So yes, it needs to be driven by the sorts of things you want to be known for as a brand and a reputation that you want to build, but it needs to be rooted in the commercial side of actually how you're going to physically engage with clients. If it doesn't, then actually your use case and everything we were talking about before, won't resonate with the audiences that you'll need, that will give access to the funding and the influence and the strategic support that you'll need to deliver these things. I guess the third part of the CX bit, which again probably won't dwell on, is obviously just aligning the technology sort of stack right from how you go about creating that experiencing to delivering it through the multitude of digital channels that you have. That identity management piece we've sort of touched on all the way through to then how you orchestrate or you kind of and design the journeys and then deliver the content. All of that has to be lined up. I think one of the things we struggled with as an organization in this is that, again, we've had that view of a marketing technology stack, a sales technology enablement capability, a servicing technology capability, and realistically, we need, our mindset and our ITS infrastructure and the third parties actually seeing that as a distribution enablement capability platform as opposed to 3 siloed platforms, because you can't deliver the experience unless you get that right. So I think there are a couple of pointers on CX that I'd say are pretty important from an enabling perspective. Secondly, cultural, again, clearly a big area. You could have a webinar on this in its own right. What we're trying to do from a pure marketing perspective is how do we build that agile and digitally savvy marketing function. And something that's been both hard and easy as we've gone through a period of merger and integration, because there's been a desire to break that, well, we do it this way, well, they do it this way type conversation. So it's kind of forced you to forge a new way, it doesn't sound like Tony Blair, a third way of doing things. And so that's helped, but actually, again, it goes back to the experience point. Having a very kind of clear North Star to point to base those things around is really important. And one of the things we've done as we went through our reorganization for the Life Aberdeen marketing function was to push more the digital specialisms closer to the regional marketing team. So I touched on at the beginning about our sort of 4x4 model in terms of org design. We very much want to kind of thin our centers of excellence down to be generally that kind of deep areas of specialism or doing things that you would only want to do once in one area in the organization, whereas all your sort of day-to-day run of hopefully sophisticated marketing campaign design, contact strategy design, and activation around that is firmly in the hands of the regional head in the market, because it's what we should be doing. So we put some of that specialist resource, whether it be digital media resource, whether it be marketing automation resource, whether it be data analytical resource, sitting directly either aligned or actually in region where it makes sense to. And we've noticed that's helped drive a bit of a cultural change, because we were facing a world where we were delivering some of this stuff to channel marketing teams, and don't get me wrong, they were liking it. They're going, this is really good stuff. Oh yeah, how can? But they were really struggling to think about how they would change their working practice, how they would take that back to the sales teams and suggest different ways of doing things. Look at what we've got here. So actually giving them a bit more support by having specialists that are much more closely aligned to them has helped create that bit more of a collegiate and, I guess, sub team that can really try and go and affect change within the wider organization. And then the third piece, I guess, just quickly on cultural change has been a talent management. And again, something we're actually in the throes of the moment is going, again, we've probably all done traditional talent management exercise within the organization. What we're trying to do at the moment is put a very clear lens on that in terms of actually, okay, well, we can have someone that's really good at their job and shows potential because they're capable, but actually, what's the talent set that we really need to be digitally savvy, agile, natured, data and analytically driven as a sort of core foundation. And so there's certain characteristics that we place a higher value on now. So we go through sort of talent management and development plans. They're the things we look to actually support a bit further. And then the final enabler is, I guess, we all need to be forward thinking. How do we capitalize on the change? And our, it's probably the area that we've been least development, just from where we've come from, because we've been so focused, I think, internally trying to make our business work and be efficient and effective in its new sort of economic environment, its own growth ambition. But I think we're now beginning to emerge into actually we kind of have to have our heads up and how do we become, how do we allow ourselves time, I think, to properly debate meaningful things about how the world might shift and where the opportunities may come from. And I think that is in kind of three areas in terms of, how do we develop new insight on our clients as individuals, as well as how they interact within the organization. Again, what insight, how's that changing the buying decision? How's that changing the sort of requirements they might have from asset managers? We're trying to ask ourselves those questions a lot more. Build that neural sort of network within an organization as well, recognizing that a lot of this is B2B. So actually, who influences who, how can we be savvy in terms of landing our engagement with that organization in the right way? But then also, you've got to be trend watching. You need to be thinking of other things beyond that, and they don't have to be, stratospheric and significantly different. But we are, open banking. It's okay. Appreciate it's not particularly new, but how can we work with open banking organizations and use open banking technology as a way of creating maybe engagement for saving and investment opportunities? There's clearly probably bigger potential to do something in that space as opposed to a pension, which has been something hard to get customer engagement with. Is something that you don't have that many interactions with. People kind of forget about it. So people are far more likely to engage with what's happening on their open banking world. So how much of that is a genuine channel we should be thinking of from a distribution perspective. So I'm conscious of time. I'll stop there. Again, there's huge areas that we could cover with all of these things, but CX is really important end to end. Culture is massively important. The forward thinking bit, I think, is by far the hardest, because you have a day job to run, and you've got an immediate view. But how can you creatively think about at least creating space to make sure you've got your head looking far enough ahead to keep evolving the organisation. So with that, pass back to Abhijeet. And I know we're close to 5 o'clock here in the UK, but maybe a time for a question or two.
Sure, Simon. I'm ready to take any questions on enablers. I'll just give. I always have questions for you, Simon, on enablers, but I'll just give a couple of questions to come from the audience if there are any questions there. Okay, so we have a question coming in. Can you name some initiatives that has resonated well with the leadership, and also initiatives that were kick-started and has failed to get management's nod after a POV stage?
Yeah, let's have a think. So I think I kind of touched on it earlier, that one of the initiatives that has resonated really well with distribution leadership. Again, I'm not going to claim credit for being directly aligned to it, but it hopefully shows some of the thinking that's happening within the organisation. Is this sort of buy list analytics tool? This is just a recognition that you can in the wholesale environment, you can spend one way of just pounding the streets, knocking down on IFA's doors, trying to get in and get lucky to some extent. Or you recognise the fact that within the wholesale space, that actually most of the investment decisions are getting made at a sort of a portfolio level, and the importance of being on buy lists and in model portfolios is massively important. So this project really kind of picked up that and supercharged that by saying actually there is data out there where you can see who holds what funds, and where they sit. So if you understand something happens with that fund in terms of performance, you can very, very quickly identify the relatively limited audience you need to go to where you have opportunities to significantly turn the dial in your flow. So, we could be sitting in a world where we have a very compelling European equity proposition. We know X asset manager has £5 billion worth of assets in that fund. We know our fund's outperforming it by a country mile, but for some reason we're not getting any traction. Now, when something happens with that fund, i.e. another performance reporting cycle comes through or whatever, we can very quickly identify now, literally in seconds, as I said, who are exactly the right people to go and talk to. So that takes, there's a lot of analytics that sort of sit behind that, taking in various forms of third-party data as well as our own data. But that got traction pretty well. One that's sort of struggled is a concept of client portals. There's been a lot of chat about institutional client portals and asset management, about whether they work or whether they don't. and it's just been a very hard project to get off the ground. There's a, and I think for me it's because the use case hasn't been clear. To some extent you can argue the portal use case has reduced the cost to serve argument. To other extent, it's harder to argue it's generally going to deepen client engagement and you're going to get the level of adoption engagement that you'd want with it. So I think the portal one hasn't really resonated. We haven't really put the power behind just yet, although it's not to say it's dead. Something like the analytics, Biolist analytics tool, something that got great attraction and will transform how quickly we can react and capitalize on opportunities.
Thank you. Thanks for a very elaborative answer, Simon. We have one more from Stuart. Thank you, Stuart. Can you expand on how you help channel to adopt a more data-driven approach than creative-led? Okay, so if I understand the question, yeah, right. To be first, it's been difficult. I mean, it's I guess that the channel team are really very closely in our world aligned to the sales team, and they're focused about sales enablement activity predominantly. There's a lot of event activity, and then there's a lot of reliance on sort of traditional campaigning sort of tactics. What we've done, it's been a really sort of long journey. Again, starting to be able to show, I guess, the impact on the media performance of some of the digital media activities being one of the ways that started to get them to shift and believe in terms of think about where they allocate budgets going forward. Where we've been able to make it fairly clear in terms of the goal completion rates across our digital media journeys that we've been putting in place are very clear, visible, and much more tangible than what was coming through other sources of activity they've been doing. So we've in part probably attacked it from a budget perspective and said, look, guys, are we really comfortable we're spending the money in the right place? And we've got a set of information here that shows this stuff seems to be more efficient and more effective than what else is happening that's not really clear, apart from intuitively it makes sense what you're doing. So I think that's helped. I think the challenge is, for me, this leads to a completely different way of marketing into our audiences. So it becomes a much more always on automated contact strategy perspective, as opposed to more traditional campaign structure, which is where the channel guys have been, and to some extent some still are. So we're kind of it's just a sort of continual effort, and again, just trying to find proof of concepts, areas where it works well, and then make sure we amplify that across the rest of the channel teams to show what does work well going forward. We had a good success within our UK wholesale, where with the data we gave them, you could basically then start designing campaigns both on not I want to sell European equities, but you can say, actually, I want to sell European equities, but I want to go and get this many new clients. I want this many top-ups and increase market share, or I want this many cross-sales, because we've got the data that shows these are the people we marketed to, and these are the people that went on to buy the fund, and they're either brand new, existing, or existing but didn't hold the fund. So that suddenly gives you a whole different dynamic about how you build a contact strategy in a campaign. And when people heard that, they got excited, and it created some further change. We have one more question coming in. Do you see the appetite for a larger transformation programs increasing as a result of COVID, or will incremental use case based initiatives continue to be the main drive? Yeah, great question. I mean, I think what we've seen is COVID's just sort of accelerated a lot of the trends that we were seeing and we were planning on within our world. The fact that face-to-face sales have gone off the road for the period here in the UK, likewise in many other parts of the world, has just increased the importance for us of digital marketing and digital client engagement strategies that we're trying to put in place. So, and I think people have recognised that benefit very, very quickly. So if anything, I think COVID probably increases the appetite for further change on this scale, and I think we're beginning to see that in terms of actually the ask and the ambitions getting a lot bigger in terms of how much can we really digitally transform our organisation and use this as a catalyst to make a significant step forward, as opposed to going back to incremental improvements. I guess we are almost 5 minutes. We have two more questions. We can take a couple of questions quickly if that is okay. Okay, we have an interesting question, Simon. If 0 is no seat at the top of the table for business decision making, and 10 is leading business strategy, where are you?
Well, that's good. I think probably go and speak to some colleagues in Life Aberdeen, and they'll let you know. I mean, I think we're probably sitting at, in terms of trying to drive the marketing transformation agenda that we're trying to deliver. We are plugged into our direct boss is a sort of board director, so he's helping drive that. So I'd like to think we're 7 or 8 in terms of trying to drive the strategy that we're trying to push forward. Again, I think the caveat I'd say is, as I've sort of alluded to, there's a huge amount of organisational and big strategic decisions that are happening within the business that I'm clearly not part of. But us trying to evolve and transform our overarching distribution effort, we're kind of, I guess, above 6. I'd like to think.
Okay, thank you, Simon. We have one question for the enablers area. Is it challenging to transform the marketer's mindset and align them with the data strategy and drive adoption of data solutions? How do you overcome that?
Yes, it's incredibly challenging because I think people have worked in a set way for a long time, and even if they recognise the benefits of doing it, I guess to some extent they've never done it, and also they're working with in our sense, a distribution sort of team that's also operating in a long way. So again, it's the channel guys are naturally very, very close to a traditional face-to-face sales process. So when they're dealing at that level, trying to get some change every year in planning cycle or every quarter review that they're sort of doing, is a challenge. And I think how you overcome that, I think that's where probably our conversations are. We're as I said just then, we're having active conversations across the distribution leadership group within Standard Life Aberdeen to kind of try and set expectations for how we think and what we think good marketing and good I guess distribution management practices could and should look like. So it's a bit of top-down pressure as well as encouragement bottom up. And as I said, we've tried to put more specialists around our channel teams to give them confidence to try and push some of the initiatives they see possible going forward.
Thank you. We have one more. We can take one more. And what would be your top 3 suggestions for companies embarking on a digital transformation journey from a change management perspective?
Cool. Right. Top 3. One, I guess C-suite sponsor is key. You need, maybe lose the question that came before. You need someone at the very sort of top table that is passionately engaged and wanting to push the sort of change and the implication that sort of comes through. Second tip, I think, is within whatever function and whatever area, I think you have to create a sort of a small, I guess, program team. I don't like to use the word program because it smacks of sort of project sort of structure and so on. But yeah, you need it. I guess you need a little coalition of allies and supporters within the function or cross function, depending on the realm. So these things are hard, and if nothing else, you need other people to be on that journey with you, equally as passionate and accountable for doing that. And I guess the third thing, it's a bit of a cliche, kind of communication around this in terms of making sure the communication flow and pattern is right. I think I think people are always motivated by two things when I think about communication sort of strategies around this, in terms of, you know, people either change because they recognize that the raft is on fire and you need to jump, or they're motivated by the fact that that's a nice shiny place, I'd love to get to that. So I think it's kind of knowing that audience and knowing which lever to pull in terms of communication, you know, how much you need to, you know, in our instance, push the industry dynamics and the need to think about our cost base in a completely different way gets a certain portion of the audience moving. There's another portion of the audience that go, actually, wouldn't it be amazing if we could manage client relationships in this way and engage with them in a different way and increase net promoter scores and cross sales targets and everything else that might go with that. So yeah, understand that audience and think of those two levers to help encourage that motivation to change.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. I think right now, I guess we've just almost 11 minutes over time, so we will conclude the session. I just want to thank you, Simon. We are really grateful for the time and effort you took to share your thoughts and experiences with everyone. I guess for every enterprise entering a new growth phase, your comments were very timely. I believe they all can benefit from the methods you suggested. For organizations who are already on the journey, like midway, these insights will help them to accelerate and help build digital capabilities for the future. Your enthusiasm is contagious, and we hope to use your suggestions, Simon. Thank you again for your contribution. I guess what I'm taking back is becoming a digital enterprise requires fundamentally changing the way everyone runs the business. This experience, your experience and direction which you gave us today is going to help us to break through these inevitable barriers as well. And it's going to increase every organization's odds for achieving a successful digital transformation. So thank you once again. It was a very good session.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure. And thanks everyone for joining and the questions.
Thank you all. And for the questions which we are not able to answer, we'll take those questions, and please do write to us. Our email addresses and all those details are in the invite. Just in case if you need to reach out to me, I'm on Abhijeet@latentview.com. Thank you.